June 30th, 1941. South of Minsk, Belarusian SSR. Dawn haze clung low over the wheat fields as the 7th Panzer Division pushed east, engines snarling through the cool morning air. Dew shimmered on the edges of torn Soviet defensive trenches, and the smell of burned fuel drifted lazily across the wind as German tanks rumbled forward in staggered formation. Oberfeldwebel Karl Ritter stood half-exposed in the cupola of his Panzer III, goggles pressed tight, scanning the tree line ahead. The rising sun backlit everything in a harsh orange glow, turning dust into mist and silhouettes into threats. Inside the turret, loader Josef Kraus murmured, "Too quiet, even for them." Ritter didn't respond. He felt it too, the heaviness in the air before something went terribly wrong. Then it came. A thunderous crack split the countryside. Not the sharp metallic ping of anti-tank rifles, not the flat thump of a 45mm field gun. This was deeper, like the earth itself had exhaled in anger. The lead Panzer III jerked to a stop. Its turret was punched inward, metal curling like tin foil. Flames exploded from its hatches. "T-34!" someone shouted over the radio, voice cracking. Before Ritter could react, a second blast tore through the formation, kicking up soil and shrapnel. A gray blur rolled from the tree line, the shape unfamiliar, angular, wider than expected, and moving faster than any Soviet tank they had seen. The thing seemed to glide over the uneven ground, its sloped armor glistening with morning dew. Ritter finally saw it clearly, a T-34-76. Its turret turned with unsettling smoothness. "Traverse right," Ritter barked. "Kraus, AP in." Kraus slammed a shell into place as Gefreiter Oswald cranked the traverse wheel, sweat dripping into his eyes despite the cool air. The Panzer III shuddered as it lined up its shot, but the Russian tank had already fired again. Another German vehicle erupted in a black plume. "Who are these guys?" Oswald muttered. Ritter didn't know. None of them did. Everything about this Soviet machine seemed wrong. Its speed, its angle of armor, the way its tracks tore through thick mud without slowing. He steadied his breathing. "On my mark. Fire!" The Panzer III's 50mm gun roared. The shell struck the T-34's hull with a bright white spark and bounced. It didn't even leave a dent. "Hit! But no effect!" Kraus shouted, voice cracking with disbelief. The T-34 turned toward them. Ritter's heart hammered. "Another round, aim for the tracks!" But the Soviet tank wasn't interested in dueling. It revved its engine, an almost mechanical growl, and vanished back into the tree line with shocking speed. Within seconds, the battlefield was quiet again, except for the crackling of burning German armor. Silence. Confusion. Fear. Ritter lowered himself into the turret, breathing hard. Kraus finally spoke. "That thing, it shouldn't move like that." Ritter agreed, but he didn't say it. Because what troubled him most wasn't how the T-34 fought, but how it disappeared, as if the earth had swallowed it whole. By noon, engineers arrived to inspect the wrecks. Ritter watched as a lieutenant crouched beside the ruined hulls, tracing his finger along the shallow, almost laughable dents left by German fire. "Impossible," the officer muttered. "A dozen direct hits, and nothing." Ritter leaned closer. "Sir, we disabled it. We saw it pull back smoking." The lieutenant narrowed his eyes. "You say it was retreating? Burning?" "Yes," Ritter replied. "We saw it take damage." The officer exhaled sharply. "Well, it didn't stay damaged. Reports are coming in from the southern line. A T-34 with similar markings was spotted again, 2 hours later." He looked back toward the tree line, troubled. "Your destroyed tank has reappeared." The words settled heavily. Reappeared? Ritter exchanged looks with his crew. Kraus swallowed hard. How? That doesn't make sense. But it would only get stranger. That evening, as Ritter's crew refueled and prepared for another push east, distant artillery rumbled in the background. Medics dragged wounded men past the bivouac, whispering about ghost tanks, Soviet machines that seemed to die and return again. No one laughed at the superstition, especially when the radio crackled to life with a shaken voice from a neighboring battalion. "German command, be advised. The same T-34s we engaged this morning have re-entered the fight. They're coming back patched, repaired, faster than they should be." Ritter felt a cold prickling crawl up his spine. Hours. The Soviets were repairing a tank, that tank, in mere hours. A machine the Germans barely scratched. As night fell over the smoking fields of Byelorussia, Ritter stood beside his Panzer, listening to the distant clatter of fighting and the eerie hum of Soviet engines threading through the dark. He couldn't shake the feeling that something new had entered this war, something the Wehrmacht was not prepared for. And soon, he would see just how terrifyingly persistent the T-34 truly was. Night dissolved into a thin gray morning, July 1st, 1941, as the 7th Panzer Division prepared to advance again. The air tasted of cordite and wet soil, and a heavy fog clung low across the battered plain. Ritter climbed into his cupola, fingers still aching from the previous day's engagement. His nerves were frayed, but orders were orders. Push east and break the Soviet line. Kraus, bleary-eyed from a sleepless night, muttered while loading the ready rack. "If those damn T-34s are still out there, maybe today we'll get a clean kill." Ritter didn't reply. He'd heard the same confidence from other panzer crews yesterday morning, right before the landscape lit up with burning German steel. Engines roared to life, one by one, growling through the morning fog. "Panzerzug, advance at quarter speed. Keep dispersion," the battalion commander barked through the net. The formation rolled forward, tracks grinding over churned mud and the twisted metal remains of yesterday's losses. Ritter scanned ahead, searching for movement. Every shattered tree trunk looked like a turret. Every shadow moved. Then Oswald hissed, "Contact! Front left!" Through the mist, a hulking silhouette sat half sunk in the mud. Its turret drooped to the side, smoking faintly. Ritter recognized the shape instantly. Another T-34. This one, though, looked dead. Its tracks were blown clean off, the hull pocked with blackened scorch marks. A German engineer team was already approaching it cautiously, waving the panzers forward. "Guess even Soviet armor has limits," Kraus muttered. But Ritter kept his binoculars fixed. Something unsettled him. The damage pattern. He had seen it before. The shell marks, the scorch across the turret. It looked exactly like the tank they had damaged yesterday. Too exact. As his Panzer rolled past, he spotted something else. Weld lines. Fresh, clean welds, tracing across the tank's starboard hull. Repairs. Quick repairs. Almost crude, but solid enough to get the machine rolling again. Ritter's mouth went dry. "Command said the Soviets were repairing them fast," Oswald whispered. "But overnight? That's not possible." "It is for them," Ritter said. "Look at it." The engineer team radioed in confirmation. The tank was the same hull number reported destroyed yesterday afternoon. Somehow, it had returned to battle and died again. In a different place, fighting a different German battalion. A ripple of unease spread through the panzer column. The advance slowed as they entered a shallow ravine, the sides steep and covered in tall grass. Ritter hated it instantly. It smelled like an ambush. "Stay sharp," he ordered. The Panzer III lurched over a mound of earth and slid slightly as wet mud gave way underneath. Fog swirled around them. Vision dropped to almost nothing. Then a sound sliced through the murk. A deep metallic clatter, rhythmic, heavy. An engine. Not German. "Turret front!" Ritter snapped. Oswald spun the turret, every muscle strained. Krauss slammed another AP round into the breach. Ritter wiped the fog from his goggles, heart pounding. A dark mass loomed through the whiteness, a T-34. Then another, and a third, fanning out like wolves through the mist. One of them had a fresh patch of gray primer on its hull, the same weld lines Ritter saw moments ago. "Impossible," he whispered. "That one was dead. We just passed it dead." The Soviets didn't wait. Their lead tank fired first, the blast echoing like thunder trapped inside the ravine. A Panzer IV to the right erupted, turret flipping as ammunition cooked off. "Reverse! Reverse!" Ritter barked. But the narrow ravine walls funneled the German tanks into a deadly choke point. They, T-34s, moved with terrifying agility, climbing the ravine's sides as if the mud meant nothing. Their engines growled, spitting exhaust as they repositioned. Ritter lined up a shot. "Fire!" The 50mm round struck the T-34's turret ring. A glint, a spark, nothing more. Krauss cursed, slamming in another shell. "They're made of demons, I swear." Oswald spun the turret desperately as the Soviet tanks repositioned. One T-34 descended the ridge, sliding down the mud like a predator ready to strike. Ritter keyed the radio. "HQ, this is Panther II-3. We have multiple T-34s. Repeat, multiple, at least one that was previously confirmed destroyed. They're repaired and operational." Static. Then a shaken German voice answered. "All units, retreat to fallback line 3. Do not attempt to engage if outnumbered. These T-34 hulls are appearing faster than we can record them." The ravine exploded with gunfire as more German tanks ignited. Ritter felt his throat tighten. Hours. They were repairing and redeploying T-34s in hours. And now, the Germans were trapped with them. He slammed the hatch closed as a Soviet shell screamed overhead, showering the turret in dirt and steel fragments. "Driver, hard reverse, now!" The Panzer III lurched backward, engine straining, treads churning mud. Through the periscope, Ritter watched as the T-34 with the fresh weld marks turned its turret toward them. Its green paint still streaked with yesterday's scorch marks, like a ghost wearing its own tombstone. And it was coming for them. The Panzer III tore backward through the mud, engine howling as Ritter braced himself against the turret wall. Every jolt rattled his teeth. Behind them, the ravine flashed with fire. German tanks erupting one after another as the T-34s pressed their assault. "Faster!" Ritter shouted down to the driver, Gefreiter Weber. "I am going faster," Weber snapped, sweat slicking his neck as he wrestled the steering levers. "The mud's too deep." A Soviet shell slammed into the ravine wall just meters to their right, blasting earth across the Panzer's hull and pelting the armor with rock shards. The force rocked the tank sideways, nearly throwing Oswald off his seat. "We have to get out of this choke," Oswald shouted. "They'll pin us in and gut the whole column." Ritter knew that. Everyone knew that. But knowing didn't put them on higher ground. He popped the cupola hatch just enough to peer out. The fog was thinning, just enough for him to make out the dark silhouette of the leading T-34 sliding down the embankment again, its repaired hull plates glaring in the pale morning light. The thing moved like some unstoppable beast, treads tearing deep gouges into the earth, its turret locked onto them. "Brace!" The shot cracked the ravine like a thunderclap. The round struck just ahead of the Panzer, spraying mud and debris over the hull. Weber cursed loudly, fighting to keep control as the tank fishtailed. "Keep reversing. Don't let it get a clean hit," Ritter barked. Krauss slammed a new round into the breech, working mechanically through the panic. "Loaded." Ritter lowered himself back into the turret. "Oswald, traverse. Put one into its vision block." Oswald spun the turret wheel with both hands, muscles shaking. The world outside slid sideways through the gun sight until the T-34's upper glacis filled the view, its metal scarred and patched, but intact. Alive again. "Fire!" The Panzer III recoiled sharply. Through the haze, Ritter saw their round strike, just millimeters below the driver's hatch. A spark, a ricochet, nothing. "It's like shooting at a damn fortress," Krauss yelled. The T-34 responded instantly. Its gun spat flame, but the shell went wide, detonating against the ravine wall. "Driver, get us out of this kill zone," Ritter barked. "I'm trying," Weber roared back, voice breaking. The Panzer III clawed its way up a patch of broken terrain where the mud was thinner. The tracks bit hard, the tank lurched, and then they were climbing, slipping, climbing again toward the lip of the ravine. Behind them, another German Panzer, slower, struggling, wasn't so lucky. A T-34 round punched straight through its side, the explosion lighting up the fog with a sickening orange glow. Ritter felt the heat from it, even inside the steel shell of his own tank. As they broke free of the ravine's lip, the world suddenly widened. Open fields stretching toward the east, dotted with burning armor and blackened, churned earth. Smoke billowed skyward like funeral pyres. But something else caught Ritter's attention. Movement. West of the ravine. More T-34s, not advancing, not engaging, being repaired. Ritter blinked hard, unsure if his eyes were betraying him. 3 wrecked Soviet tanks sat in a makeshift clearing, surrounded by crews working furiously despite the chaos. Welding torches spitting white sparks, mechanics hammering armor plates into place, others replacing tracks like a pit crew at a race. One of the tanks had a gaping hole in its side, but its turret was already turning, testing for movement, preparing to rejoin the fight. Krauss climbed halfway up the turret to see. "How the hell? They're patching them right there on the battlefield." Ritter watched in stunned silence. German doctrine required damaged tanks to be pulled to fully equipped repair depots miles to the rear. A knocked-out Panzer might take days, sometimes weeks, to get back into action. But these Soviets, hours. They were turning hulks into functional tanks in hours. The repaired T-34 they had just escaped from wasn't an anomaly. It was the rule. Oswald whispered, "Sir, if they can just keep fixing them, how are we supposed to stop them? How do you win against tanks that don't stay dead?" Ritter had no answer. A blast from behind snapped him back to the present. The T-34s in the ravine had spotted them again. "Driver, move! Head for the tree line. We need cover." The Panzer III lurched forward, treads biting into firm ground as Weber pushed the engine to its limits. Ritter kept the hatch open, scanning constantly as they raced toward the woods. But he couldn't shake the image burned into his mind. Soviet crews resurrecting tanks right there on the field, under fire, desperate but determined. And the German realization spreading like dread through every unit. These machines were not going to stay destroyed. Not today, not tomorrow. They would keep coming, patched, welded, limping, yet still deadly. And Ritter knew the next time they faced one, his Panzer might not be lucky enough to escape. The forest swallowed the Panzer III in shadow. tall pines rising like dark pillars on either side of the narrow trail. Weber slowed the tank to a cautious crawl, the engine rumbling low as Ritter kept his head above the cupola, scanning between the trunks. The air here was cold, thick with the scent of sap and damp soil. After the chaos of the ravine, the silence felt unreal, almost hostile. Kraus exhaled shakily. I thought that was it back there. I really did. Don't think about it, Ritter said. Just stay ready. But even he couldn't get the image out of his mind. The Soviet crews welding, hammering, and rearming their tanks right on the battlefield, while German units were still struggling to regroup. It wasn't just the T-34's armor or speed. It was the refusal of these machines to stay dead. Weber steered the Panzer around a fallen tree. Sir, where are we linking up? Command's channels are a mess. Fallback line 3, Ritter said, though he wasn't certain the line still existed. We'll regroup with whoever is still standing. A distant boom echoed through the forest. Oswald stiffened. Artillery? Ritter listened. The ground vibrated faintly beneath them. No, he said slowly. Engines. Weber looked back from the driver's seat. Ours? Another low, throaty rumble drifted through the trees, a sound too deep, too heavy to be German. T-34 engines. Oswald swore under his breath. They're sweeping the forest. Ritter ducked back into the turret, lowering the hatch halfway. Driver, kill the engine. Now. Weber shut it down. The Panzer III fell into silence, cooling metal ticking quietly. The crew held still, listening. The Soviet engines grew louder, several of them rolling steadily, methodically like predators working a grid. Ritter's pulse quickened. He whispered, "They're hunting." A shadow passed between the trees. A bulky silhouette, green against the dark undergrowth. A T-34 rumbled through the forest not 50 meters away, branches scraping loudly against its hull. Another followed behind it, and a third. Their hatches were open. Soviet commanders stood in their turrets, scanning the tree line with binoculars, searching for survivors, searching for Germans. Ritter motioned silently for everyone to stay still. But then he saw something that chilled him more than the sight of the tanks themselves. A familiar marking painted on the turret of the lead vehicle. Half burned, blackened around the edges. The same tank they had fought yesterday morning. Ritter felt his mouth go dry. It wasn't just repaired. It was active, hunting again. Its turret ring freshly greased, its hull plates fitted with rough, new weld seams like scars. Kraus whispered, barely audible, "Sir, how many times are we going to have to kill that same damn thing?" Ritter didn't answer. He couldn't. The T-34s halted. Engines idled, purring like beasts scenting the air. One Soviet commander raised a hand. "Tom! Prover it, Tom!" "There. Check there." The second tank began turning toward the trail where the Panzer III sat hidden, its tracks crushing undergrowth with an unnerving crunch. Ritter braced himself, ready to shout for Weber to start the engine and run for it. But something else caught the Soviets' attention first. Gunfire. Heavy. Close. A German anti-tank team was engaging from somewhere deeper in the forest. A daring ambush or a desperate last stand? Ritter couldn't tell. But the Soviets reacted instantly. All three T-34s pivoted as one and charged toward the noise, engines roaring. The forest exploded with chaos, shouts, metal crashing, and the deafening boom of tank guns fired at point-blank range. As soon as the Soviets disappeared into the trees, Ritter whispered, "Driver, go. Quiet as you can. We have to move before they circle back." Weber restarted the engine with a soft whine. The Panzer crept along the trail, treads cracking twigs and crushing needles underfoot. Every noise felt like a shout. Kraus spoke after a long silence. "Sir, they don't care about preserving the tanks. They just care about keeping them alive long enough to fight." Ritter nodded grimly. "And they can get them fighting again faster than we can report them as destroyed." The trail opened into a clearing where smoke drifted lazily across the sky. Ahead, the remnants of German units were gathering. Panzerjäger crews, scattered infantry, damaged panzers with makeshift repairs of their own. A shaken Feldwebel rushed toward them. "You're from 2nd Company?" Ritter nodded. "Good. Command's pulling everyone back. Those T-34s keep coming back at us. Officers are saying we're fighting the same tanks 2-3 times." Ritter met his eyes. "We are?" The Feldwebel swallowed. "Then God help us." Ritter climbed out of the cupola, boots hitting the dirt as distant T-34 engines echoed again. Relentless, tireless, coming closer. And for the first time since the campaign began, he understood something that German High Command had refused to believe. The Soviets had a tank that could outfight, outrun, outlast, and resurrect itself faster than the Wehrmacht could destroy it. And those ghost tanks were still coming. The clearing buzzed with frantic movement. Mechanics crawled over damaged Panzer IVs, tightening bolts and hammering dented skirt plates back into place. Infantrymen, faces smeared with ash and dirt, dug shallow defensive positions between broken tree stumps. Artillery spotters scanned the tree line, hands trembling as they adjusted their binoculars again and again, as if expecting the forest itself to lurch forward and attack. Ritter climbed down from the Panzer III, boots sinking into soft earth churned by retreating tracks. The air was thick with the smell of oil, wet pine, and something else. Fear. Not the panicked kind that strikes in the middle of a firefight, but a deeper, slower dread. The kind that gnaws at the edges of discipline. "Sir," Weber said quietly as he joined him, "what if they don't stop? What if they keep sending the same tank at us until it finally gets lucky?" Ritter looked toward the tree line, where the T-34 engines still growled in the distance, growing louder. "Then we don't give them the chance." A nearby captain, face pale beneath a crust of grime, shouted to gathering crews, "All units prepare for counterattack. Artillery barrage incoming to push them back from the forest edge." Ritter's stomach churned. A counterattack? Against that? He approached the captain. "Herr Hauptmann, those tanks won't break. They repaired one 3 times in under 36 hours. It's still out there." The officer wiped sweat from his brow, visibly shaken but trying to keep the mask of command intact. "I know what reports say, Oberfeldwebel, but we have our orders." Ritter didn't argue. Orders kept the army functioning. Orders didn't keep tanks alive. The artillery behind them opened fire, the ground trembling as shells screamed overhead. Branches snapped and trees shattered at the forest edge. Smoke billowed upward, blooming into rolling black clouds. For a moment, just a heartbeat, the forest went quiet. Kraus climbed out of the turret. "Maybe we bought ourselves some time." Ritter didn't trust the silence. Neither did anyone else. A single low rumble broke the stillness. Then another, and another, and through the smoke at the forest's edge, they appeared. 5 T-34s. Not in formation, not in parade alignment, just charging, feral, unstoppable. Their armor glowed faintly from the heat of the artillery blasts. Dirt cascaded from their hulls as they burst through the smoldering undergrowth. Some had fresh weld scars, others mismatched road wheels cannibalized from wrecks, and at least one carried chunks of missing fender hanging loosely like torn skin. But they were moving, and they were firing. The first shell slammed into a German anti-tank gun, flipping it backward and scattering its crew across the clearing. Second hit a fuel truck. Flames roared upward, washing heat across the field. "Panzer crews, to your vehicles!" the captain shouted. Ritter sprinted back to the Panzer III with Kraus and Oswald on his heels. Weber had the engine running before Ritter even dropped into the cupola. "All in," Weber yelled. "We're mobile." The Panzer lurched forward, turret swinging toward the charging Soviet line. "AP loaded," Kraus called out. "Target the lead tank," Ritter barked. "Aim for the driver's hatch. Smallest chance, but take it." Oswald steadied his hands, breath shaking as he peered through the gun sight. It's the same one. The same markings. The same tank they'd fought in the field. The same tank they'd seen repaired in the clearing. The same tank they'd watched hunting through the forest. 3 times destroyed. 3 times reborn. "Fire!" The 50mm round streaked toward the T-34, and for the first time by sheer luck or desperation, it struck the hatch seam at exactly the right angle. The shell ripped through the front plate with a shriek of tearing steel. The Soviet tank shuddered, lurched sideways, smoke pouring from its seams as it skidded to a grinding stop. The crew inside bailed out, crawling desperately from the hatches. One on fire, another limping, a third covered in soot and blood. German infantry cut them down seconds later. Kraus whooped. "We got it! We finally killed that bastard!" Ritter didn't celebrate. He watched the burning T-34 for a long, tense moment as the other Soviet tanks roared past it, flanking German positions, hammering the clearing with merciless fire. Oswald shouted, "Sir, more coming from the left!" Indeed, through the haze of smoke and artillery dust, fresh silhouettes materialized. 3 more T-34s pushed forward, these with crude wooden logs strapped to their hulls, field-expedient armor against anti-tank ditches. Kraus's triumph faded instantly. "They just keep coming." Ritter steadied himself against the turret ring as the Panzer rocked from the recoil of another shot. "Listen to me," he said, voice low but fierce. "We kill them when we can. We fall back when we must. And we stay alive until someone in Berlin realizes what we're up against." Because deep down, he knew this was no ordinary armor duel. No test of tactics or firepower. This was a war of endurance, a war against a machine that refused to stay dead. And as the clearing erupted into chaos once more, Ritter understood with chilling clarity. The T-34 wasn't a tank. It was a promise. A Soviet promise that every hour, every day, no matter how many the Germans destroyed, another one would rise to take its place. The clearing had become a storm of fire and steel. As German tanks scattered to form a new defensive arc, the earth shook under the relentless advance of the T-34s. Machine gun fire rattled through the smoke. The last rays of sun were swallowed by soot and the towering columns of burning fuel. Ritter's Panzer III jolted violently as Weber swung them toward a shallow ridge overlooking the clearing. A position with better cover, but only if they reached it before the Soviets overran the field. "Brace!" Weber shouted as the tank crashed through a patch of blasted undergrowth, the suspension groaning in protest. Oswald gritted his teeth, hands locked on the traverse controls. "Which one am I shooting at? They're everywhere." "All of them," Ritter said grimly. "Focus on the closest. Fire at will." Before the words had fully left his mouth, a T-34 burst through a burning wall of pine branches, its turrets snapping toward them with frightening speed. It fired. The flash of its gun, a white-hot spear through the smoke. The shell hit just short of the Panzer, exploding in a shower of dirt that hammered the hull. "Load!" Ritter shouted. Kraus slammed another AP round into the breech. "Loaded!" Oswald lined up the shot and fired. The recoil rocked them back, the round slamming into the Soviet tank's track. Sparks. A loud metallic crack. The T-34 lurched, one track torn free. It spun, snarling like a wounded animal, turret swaying as the driver struggled to regain control. "We immobilized it," Oswald yelled. "Good," Ritter barked. "Now finish it." Kraus fed another round into the gun. Oswald fired again, this time at the turret ring. The shell struck home. Smoke belched out from under the turret as flames licked upward. One Soviet crewman crawled out, coughing violently, but German machine gun fire cut him down before he made it 3 steps. But there was no time to breathe. Because even as one T-34 died, 2 more took its place. The next Soviet tank crashed through the clearing, pushing the still-burning wreck of a Panzer IV aside as though it were scrap metal. Its hull was a patchwork of mismatched plates, some smooth, some rough and hastily welded, Frankensteined together in a way that made Ritter's stomach twist. Kraus stared at it, horrified. "Sir, that tank's made of parts from 3 different wrecks. And it's still coming," Ritter said coldly. "So we stop it." But the T-34 didn't charge straight this time. It angled right, moving toward the German flank, where infantry and anti-tank teams were scrambling to form a new defensive perimeter. "Oswald, turn right," Ritter ordered. But before Oswald could swing the turret, another T-34 appeared on their left. They were being enveloped. "Driver, reverse, reverse," Ritter snapped. Weber slammed the gear lever back. The Panzer III groaned, gears grinding as it jerked away from the pincer. The second Soviet tank fired. The shell slammed into the Panzer's left side with a sickening clang, the hull buckling inward but not piercing through. Oswald flinched back. Hit to the side. Armors cracked, but holding. Kraus gripped the next shell with trembling hands. "They've got us bracketed." "No," Ritter growled, adrenaline flooding his voice. "Not yet." He scanned the chaos with practiced speed, looking for an opening, any opening. There. A dip in the terrain behind the ridge. "Weber, down slope, now!" The Panzer lurched backward, mud splattering the vision blocks. The dip offered concealment, but not safety. Above them, silhouettes of T-34s loomed against the burning tree line like armored specters. Ritter could hear them, those engines. Grinding, rattling, roaring, with the same terrifying consistency as before. The sound of machines that simply refused to quit. German units on the flank fired desperately. Scattered Pak-36 crews unleashing round after round of 37mm fire that sparked uselessly off Soviet armor. The T-34s didn't even slow down. They rolled through the blasts, their sloped armor deflecting the shots like rain. Cries echoed across the field. German positions buckled. One line after another fell back in disarray. As Weber reached the bottom of the slope, the Panzer jerked to a halt behind a curtain of thick brush. "In position," Weber announced, breathing hard. Now hidden, Ritter rose half out of the cupola, binoculars scanning the carnage above. Flames flickered across the clearing, illuminating the silhouettes of Soviet tanks. And there, at the center of it, Ritter saw it again. The same T-34. Hull number still partly blackened. Patches of primer still visible. New plate welded over the scar they'd put in it hours earlier. Kraus saw it too. No, that's impossible. "We knocked it out this morning. We all saw it burning." Oswald's voice was a whisper. "It shouldn't be there. It shouldn't even be moving." But it was. Alive again, fighting again. a mechanical revenant dragging the remains of yesterday's battle into today's. Ritter lowered his binoculars with a cold, hollow feeling in his chest. "We're not facing tanks," he said quietly. "We're facing an idea." Weber frowned. "Sir? That tank doesn't stay dead because the men behind it won't let it die." And as Ritter watched the undestroyable T-34 lead the next wave into the collapsing German flank, he finally understood the truth that High Command refused to acknowledge. The Soviets could afford to lose tanks. The Germans couldn't afford to kill the same one twice. Yet here they were, about to fight it for the third time. The ridge trembled as another explosion rippled across the clearing. Flames licked at the sky, sending burning embers drifting like fireflies through the smoky air. Ritter felt the heat from the blast even at the bottom of the slope, where his Panzer III hunkered behind the brush like a hunted animal. "Sir," Weber whispered from below, "they're pushing toward the right flank. If they break through, they will," Ritter said before he could stop himself, tightened his grip on the cupola rim. "But not before we put steel into them." Oswald steadied the gun, eyes narrowing. "Permission to engage?" "Not yet," Ritter murmured. The T-34s above them were advancing in staggered lines, moving like predators that knew they were the masters of the field. Ritter counted 7. No, 8. Some scraped and limped, their hulls patchworked and scorched. Others looked almost new, factory fresh. But among them, near the center, moved that same cursed T-34 with the fresh welds and half-burned markings. Its turret swiveled slowly, searching for threats. Ritter kept his silhouette low. "Hold, hold." The Panzer III vibrated with each Soviet shot. Dirt showered down the slope as another German anti-tank gun went silent in a flash of fire and screams. "Sir, if we wait any longer," Kraus began. "We wait," Ritter snapped. They were too exposed, too small, too fragile. A single miscalculation, and they would be scrap metal confetti across this ravine. But then, a break. A gap opened between the Soviet advance. 2 T-34s drifted apart as they navigated burning wreckage, leaving a narrow corridor of exposed hulls. "Driver," Ritter whispered. "Forward 3 meters." Weber eased the Panzer up the slope, treads gripping the damp earth. The cannon lifted into firing position. The wounded T-34, the Revenant, turned slightly, showing the scarred angle of its flank. "There," Ritter breathed. "That's our shot." "Loaded," Kraus shouted, voice cracking. Oswald lined the crosshairs on the weakened weld seam. He held his breath, hands steady, jaw clenched. "Fire!" The shell streaked across the clearing and slammed directly into the T-34's patched hull. For an instant, just an instant, Ritter thought it bounced again. Then the welds split. The patched plate tore away like a can lid ripped from its hinges. Flame burst from the ruptured side. The tank shuddered, tracks locking up as an internal explosion rocked the turret skyward. The T-34 roared in one final, violent convulsion. Then it died. Truly died. Ritter exhaled shakily. Confirmed kill. Oswald slumped back, trembling with relief. Finally. Finally. Kraus let out a breathless laugh. Maybe that one stays dead. But before anyone could savor the victory, a shadow passed across the smoke. Another T-34 crept over the ridge, bigger, faster, angrier, its turret already locking onto their firing position. "Reverse!" Ritter barked. Weber slammed the gears back. The Panzer jerked into motion, but too slowly. The Soviet gun boomed. A shell screamed past the turret, missing by inches, detonating behind them in a geyser of dirt and flame. Oswald gripped the traverse wheel. He's reloading. Kraus shoved another round into the breech. Loaded. Weber, angle us. Oswald, left, 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 Ritter commanded. The T-34 lurched forward, smoke venting from its exhaust as it closed the distance. Its gun depression was too shallow. At close range, if they got underneath its arc, they might survive. Weber, push forward, close the gap, Ritter yelled. What? Weber cried. Sir, that's suicide. That's the only way. The Panzer III surged forward. The T-34 fired again, but the shell sailed overhead as the German tank raced under its minimum depression angle. We're too close for him, Oswald shouted. Good, Ritter said. Now kill it. Oswald elevated the gun sharply, firing upward into the Soviet tank's underside. One of the few vulnerabilities even a T-34 couldn't shrug off. The shot slammed into the turret floor. A choked explosion rattled the Soviet hull. Smoke billowed from its hatches. The T-34 stopped. Its engine sputtered. Then silence. Ritter didn't wait. Pull back before the others see us! Weber reversed wildly, treads clawing at the dirt as they slid back into the brush. The Panzer III dove out of sight again, swallowed by shadows, just as two more T-34s thundered past the smoking corpse of their comrade. Kraus slumped against the turret wall, chest heaving. Sir, I can't keep doing this. They're everywhere. Ritter looked at his crew. Men exhausted, terrified, but still fighting. Still alive. We fight what's in front of us, he said quietly. And when there's nothing left but ghosts, we fight them too. Around them, German lines continued to collapse. Officers shouted retreat orders. Ammunition ran dry. Flames swallowed the last pack guns. But for one brief moment, under the shattered pine canopy, the Panzer III and its crew had carved a gap into the Soviet wave. A gap carved from courage, desperation, and a kill earned against what should have been an impossible enemy. Still, Ritter knew the truth. More T-34s were coming. Fresh ones, repaired ones, and maybe even another bearing the same markings they'd just destroyed. Because on this battlefield, death simply wasn't permanent. Not for the Soviets, not for their steel, and not for the monster the Germans had come to fear, the tank that wouldn't stay dead. The forest canopy crackled as artillery rumbled in the distance, each concussion echoing through the splintered timbers like drum beats for an unending war. Ritter steadied himself against the cupola as the Panzer III crept backward into a shallow ravine. The air stank of burnt fuel and the metallic tang of vaporized steel. Weber finally slowed the tank. We're hidden for the moment, sir. Ritter nodded, though his eyes stayed fixed on the tree line above. For the moment. Oswald slumped onto an ammunition crate, sweat dripping through soot-smudged eyebrows. Kraus, still trembling, slid the breech open and shut repeatedly, a nervous tick disguised as maintenance. The forest was quiet again. Too quiet. Ritter lifted his binoculars. The ridge they'd just escaped from still burned, smoke curling like black serpents against the evening sky. He tracked movement, Soviet infantry pouring over the crest, some ducking behind the burned husk of the last T-34 they'd killed. He watched them swarm the wreck, prying open its hatches, dragging out charred metal and tangled components. Mechanics, actual mechanics, ran cables from the ruins down toward the Soviet rear lines. Ritter froze. They were recovering it, already. Sir? Weber asked softly. Something wrong? Ritter lowered the binoculars slowly. They're hauling that wreck back for repairs. Kraus blinked. But it's gone. We cracked it open. It can't be usable. Ritter handed him the binoculars. See for yourself. Kraus pressed the lenses to his eyes, then swore. They're insane. They're actually dragging that thing back. Oswald shook his head in disbelief. How? Why? They have more tanks than they can field already. Ritter leaned against the turret wall, exhaustion pulling at him. Because to them, every tank is a soldier, and every soldier returns. He thought back to the reports passed down the lines. German commanders noting with growing frustration how T-34s, they were certain had been destroyed, reappeared days later, sometimes hours later. Tanks they recognized by turret scarring, mismatched plates, unique paint marks. At first, they dismissed the reports as battlefield confusion. But after today, Ritter knew the truth. Those tanks didn't die. They withdrew, got patched up in crude field workshops by mechanics who understood the T-34's rugged simplicity, and returned, again and again, until something finally stopped them for good, if anything could. A distant rumble thundered through the forest floor. It wasn't artillery this time. It was deeper, thicker, mechanical. Weber stiffened. Sir, that's tank movement. Ritter raised his binoculars again. Through the haze of smoke, shadows moved in the fading light. Broad silhouettes, sloped armor glinting, engines snarling as they descended from the ridge in a widening arc. Not 7 this time. Not 8. At least 15. Some carried fresh paint and unscarred hulls. Some rolled forward with mismatched armor plates welded crudely onto their sides. And one, Ritter felt his throat tighten. One still bore the same unit symbol as the T-34 they'd just destroyed. Its turret was replaced, its hull repainted, but the mismatched track segments and scorched fender were unmistakable. Kraus saw it too. No, that's impossible. Oswald reached for the traverse wheel as if a nightmare could be fought by instinct alone. Sir, what do we do? We can't take that many. Ritter snapped the hatch shut. We move. Now. Weber didn't hesitate. The Panzer lurched forward, engine growling, treads churning soft earth as they snaked deeper into the ravine. Branches slapped the armor, showering the hull with debris. Behind them, the T-34 pack fanned out across the forest floor. Methodical, relentless, almost predatory. They're hunting us, Weber whispered. No, Ritter said quietly. They're sweeping the whole sector. We're just ants in the grass. The forest thickened, narrowing into a muddy trail that wound through dense undergrowth. The Panzer's radio crackled faintly with distressed chatter, units reporting breakthroughs, collapsing flanks, disappearing anti-tank crews. Weber slowed. Sir, we may get boxed in. Ritter studied the terrain through a narrow periscope slit. The forest was too dense to maneuver, too tight to run, and their engine was running hot. They wouldn't outrun anything. Keep going, Ritter ordered, until we can't. Kraus leaned in. Sir, do you think that's really the same tank? Ritter didn't answer. He didn't need to, because in his gut, he already knew. Yes, it was the same T-34, repaired, refitted, resurrected. And it was coming for them again, a tank that refused to stay dead. A tank that wanted revenge. Branches clawed at the Panzer III's hull like skeletal fingers as Weber threaded the tank deeper into the forest. The engine whined under the strain, coughing occasionally as if protesting the abuse. Ritter braced himself against the turret wall, feeling every rock and rut hammer up through the suspension. The war out on the ridge felt distant now, muted by the dense blanket of trees. But the memory of those 15 advancing T-34s pressed on their minds like a weight on their chests. Oswald kept the turret angled rearward, scanning for movement through the narrow gun sight slit. They're back there, he murmured. I can't see them, but I can feel them. Kraus nodded shakily. It's like being hunted by wolves. No, Ritter said quietly. Wolves give up eventually. A sharp metallic crack echoed from somewhere behind them, distant but unmistakable. The sound of a tree snapping under heavy armored treads. Weber swallowed hard. Sir, they're entering the forest. Ritter peered through the visor. A faint glow flickered between the trunks, orange from the ridge fires, but also the unmistakable flare of engine exhausts. They're following, he confirmed. Not fast, but steady. Why? Kraus asked. There are bigger targets, stronger resistance. Why chase us? Ritter didn't answer immediately. He remembered the scarred T-34, the one they'd killed twice, and the way it had reappeared wearing a new turret like a trophy. He remembered the Soviet mechanics dragging wrecks from the battlefield as if every frame was sacred. It's not personal, Ritter finally said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. We're just one more threat to remove. The forest path narrowed further. Weber wrestled the controls, squeezing the Panzer between two thick oaks, their bark scraping against the fenders with a groaning screech. Oswald tightened the gun's elevation brake. Sir, if we get pinned in here, we won't be able to traverse the turret. I know, Ritter replied. We'll need a clearing. Keep your eyes open. They crept forward another 100 meters before the trees finally thinned into a small hollow, no more than 20 meters across, but large enough to maneuver. We stop here, Ritter ordered. Engines low idle. Conceal in the shadows. Weber eased the tank into a patch of undergrowth, treads whispering over damp moss. When they settled, Oswald cut the turret traverse and Kraus dimmed the internal lamps. Silence fell. The kind of silence that makes a man count his own heartbeats. Minutes stretched like wire pulled too tight. The forest became a cathedral of creaks, distant pops, and wind brushing against leaves. Then, a low thrum, steady, heavy, mechanical. The first T-34 emerged between the trees, no more than 40 meters away. Its silhouette loomed like a steel beast stepped from a nightmare. It moved slowly, nose dipping as it crushed branches under its tracks. Ritter froze. Hold. No movement. The Soviet tank paused. Its turret rotated, slowly, searchingly. The gun barrel swept across the clearing, passing over the Panzer III's position by mere inches. Oswald's breath hitched. Kraus pressed himself against the armor as if trying to merge with it. The T-34 lingered. Seconds passed. 10, 20. Finally, the turret rotated away and the tank continued onward into the brush. Ritter exhaled silently. That was too close. But before relief could settle, they heard another sound. More engines. Then more. The clearing filled with the thunder of approaching treads as 2, then 3 more T-34s crawled into view, fanning out, moving in a loose search pattern, probing the forest with their guns like blind giants sniffing for prey. And then, the 4th one appeared. The familiar mismatched fenders, the fresh welded plates, the partially repainted hull that still revealed the faded outline of its old markings beneath. The same tank they'd killed. Twice. It halted directly in the center of the clearing. Weber whispered, "Sir, that's it? That's the one." Ritter didn't answer. He felt the truth settle in his gut like ice. The resurrected T-34's turret turned, slowly, deliberately, and this time, it wasn't searching randomly. It was looking directly at their hiding place. Kraus sucked in a sharp breath. "Sir, it sees us." The turret locked, the barrel leveled. Ritter snapped into action. Engine on, reverse, smoke! Weber slammed the starter. Kraus yanked the smoke dischargers. Oswald kicked the turret into rotation even though they were boxed in by trees. The T-34 fired. The world detonated in flame and splintered wood as the shot tore through the trees overhead, showering the Panzer in burning branches. Ritter shouted over the explosion, "Go, Weber, go!" The Panzer III lurched backward, treads clawing at the forest floor as another Soviet tank burst into the clearing from the right, blocking their escape. They were surrounded. The smoke swirled thickly, obscuring everything in a chaotic, choking gray. Oswald tried to angle the gun. "Sir, no shot, no angle." Ritter's fist slammed against the cupola rim. They were trapped. And the resurrected T-34 was advancing through the smoke, engine roaring like something alive, its gun lowering for the kill. The smoke hugged the forest floor like a living thing, curling through roots and brush, swallowing the Panzer III in a suffocating gray cocoon. The engine roared beneath Ritter's boots as Weber wrestled with the gears, the tank sliding and fishtailing on the wet earth. "Right side blocked," Weber shouted. "We've got nowhere." A second explosion ripped through the clearing, the concussion slamming against the Panzer's hull so hard Ritter's teeth clacked together. Shards of burning bark clattered off the armor like hail. Kraus ducked instinctively as sparks rained through the open shell racks. "They're firing blind into the smoke, sir." "No," Ritter snapped, eyes flicking toward the periscope. "Just one of them is. The other one isn't firing blind." Because he could see it, just barely, through a swirl of thinning smoke. A dark silhouette, wide hull, sloped armor, the distinctive curve of the T-34's turret, and the mismatched fender. The Revenant. It was closing the distance, pushing through the smoke like some unstoppable animal. 20 meters, maybe less. Too close for maneuver, too close for mistakes. Oswald fought the turret controls, muscles straining. "Sir, the trees. I can't get a clean traversal. We're boxed in." "Then we're not using the gun," Ritter said. Everyone froze. Kraus stared at him. "What do you mean?" Ritter threw open the cupola hatch, hot smoke pouring inside. "We ram it." Weber twisted around in his seat. "Sir, with respect, that thing weighs 30 tons. "And we weigh 20, Ritter said, "which is why we aim for its track. Drive it sideways, disrupt its angle, buy time." Oswald blinked. Buy time for what? Ritter didn't answer. He climbed halfway out of the hatch, scanning the smoke, reading shapes in the shifting gray. The T-34 loomed like a nightmare. 10 meters now. Its turret swung toward them, slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. Ritter dropped back inside. "Driver, forward, full throttle." Weber hesitated only half a second, then ground the accelerator to the floor. The Panzer III lunged, engine screaming, treads spitting mud behind it as it barreled straight toward the Soviet steel. "Brace!" Ritter barked. The impact came like a thunderclap. The Panzer slammed its prow into the T-34's left track assembly. Metal shrieked. Mud exploded upward. The Soviet tank reeled sideways, its turret jarring violently as it skidded across the forest floor, carving a furrow in the earth. But it didn't fall. It didn't tip. It was too heavy, too solid. It roared back to life almost instantly, its engine howling in fury as it tried to swing its hull around for a point-blank shot. "Weber!" Ritter yelled. "Back, now!" The Panzer reversed, tread squealing, but a second T-34 appeared through the smoke, this one on their left, cutting off retreat. Ritter spun. The first T-34 was correcting angle. The second was pinning them. And the third, somewhere behind the swirling smoke, was closing. "We're surrounded," Kraus cried. "No," Ritter corrected. "We're squeezed." And squeezed tanks still have one weapon. "Smoke grenades," Ritter ordered. Kraus yanked the internal lever. A fresh cloud of white smoke burst from the Panzer's flanks, billowing thick and fast. "Driver, throttle to half," Ritter barked. "Turn left, slowly, hug the terrain, and find us a gap." Weber obeyed, easing the Panzer into a ghostly glide through the fog. The hull scraped against roots. Branches screeched across the turret. Ritter kept one hand on Weber's shoulder, guiding him by instinct more than vision. A massive shadow slid past the smoke ahead, a Soviet tank inching forward, blindly searching. They crept beneath its gun barrel by inches. Oswald held his breath so long his face turned red. Kraus pressed his helmeted head against the ammo rack, whispering something under his breath. Maybe a prayer. The Panzer slipped behind a cluster of boulders, its outline dissolving into the smoke just as the T-34's turret swept the area. Ritter watched, barely daring to blink. The Revenant T-34 was furious. He could tell by its engine notes, sharp, aggressive revs, like the machine itself was pacing in agitation. It prowled the clearing, treads grinding, turrets swinging in arcs that cut through the thinning smoke. It wanted them. It remembered them. A distant whistle shrieked overhead. Not tank fire. Artillery. German artillery. Ritter's eyes went wide. "They're shelling the forest!" As if summoned by his warning, the first shell impacted 50 meters away, shaking the earth and flattening trees. The second slammed even closer, showering them with dirt. The T-34s reacted instantly, halting, scanning upward, disoriented by the sudden barrage. Ritter seized the moment. "Weber, full speed, toward the riverbed." "The riverbed? Sir, that's a drop. Better than being vaporized. Go!" The Panzer III roared forward, bursting from the smoke just as a shell detonated where they'd been seconds earlier. Kraus shouted over the thunder, "Sir, the Soviets, they're pulling back." Ritter stole a glance through the side slit. The T-34s were retreating into thicker forest, unwilling to sit under artillery fire. Even the Revenant hesitated before backing away, its turret facing Ritter's escaping Panzer until the very last possible moment. Then, it disappeared into the smoke. Weber steered toward the riverbed, a steep slope leading to a shallow, marshy basin. The descent would be rough. "Hold on," Ritter said. They plunged over the edge. The Panzer smashed through brush, slid sideways, and crashed into the muddy water below, rocking violently but staying on its treads. When the shaking finally stopped, the crew remained silent, breathing, listening, alive. For now. Weber broke the silence first. "Sir, do you think it's over?" Ritter looked back toward the burning forest, where the smoke twisted like a living thing. "No," he said softly. "It'll be back. Because some tanks died once, and some died over and kept coming." Cold river water burbled against the Panzer's lower hull, hissing softly where it touched the hot exhaust shroud. Steam drifted around the tank in faint white wisps, curling upward like spirits rising from the earth. The riverbed was shallow, barely deep enough to cover the crew's boots if they stepped out. But it offered the one thing they needed most: cover. Ritter wiped soot from his eyes as he pushed himself upright in the cupola. The forest above the slope was a wall of smoke and flickering firelight, branches glowing like embers in a collapsing forge. "Engines low," he murmured. Weber eased the throttle until the Maybach engine softened to a throaty murmur, blending with the bubbling water around them. Kraus slumped onto the turret basket, hands still shaking. Oswald leaned against the gun breech, staring upward as artillery flashes lit the forest canopy like lightning. Ritter took his binoculars and scanned the tree line. The Soviet tanks were gone, withdrawn deeper into the woods to escape the barrage. No silhouettes, no engine growls, no glint of steel. But the forest itself felt alive with their presence, as if the very air held their memory. Oswald broke the silence. "Sir, if artillery keeps falling, we can't stay here." "No," Ritter admitted, "but moving now is suicide." The radio crackled overhead, faint, garbled chatter from scattered German units. Ritter adjusted the frequency, listening through static. "All armored units, fall back to line Epsilon. Repeat, fall back. Soviet armor breakthrough north. T-34 formations, multiple. Cannot hold. Request immediate." The transmission cut into a screech of interference. Kraus swallowed. "Sir, we don't have a line Epsilon on our maps." "We do now," Ritter said grimly. The forest canopy groaned as another shell whistled in from the west. The explosion rippled through the riverbed, sending water sloshing against the Panzer's flank. Pebbles rattled across the armor. Weber steadied himself. "If we stay through the barrage, we risk getting boxed in by fallen trees." Oswald nodded. "And if we move before the barrage ends, we run into them again." Kraus let out a hollow laugh. "Either way, we're dead." Ritter shook his head. "Not yet." He listened, really listened, to the forest. The artillery came in rolling waves, bursts, pauses, rolling impacts, marching deeper into Soviet-occupied territory. It wasn't targeting them. It was a blanket barrage meant to slow the entire Soviet advance. "How far to the river bend?" Ritter asked. 200 meters, Weber answered. "And beyond that? Open meadow. Then the ridgeline." Ritter tapped the hatch rim. "That's our exit. We follow the riverbed until we clear this kill zone." Kraus frowned. "And if the T-34s come back?" "They won't," Ritter said. "Not until the barrage ends. Even they know better than to drive into falling steel." Oswald raised a skeptical brow. "Even the one that keeps coming back?" Ritter paused. "Especially that one. Because that T-34, whatever men crewed it, wasn't reckless. It was patient, calculated, and it hunted with purpose." "Driver," Ritter said, "half throttle. Keep our profile low. We move with the water." Weber nodded and gently coaxed the Panzer into motion. Mud churned beneath the tracks as the tank crept downstream, staying beneath the cover of the smoke drifting from the collapsing forest. Every few meters, Ritter scanned the tree line. He saw movement. A branch falling, a burst of flame, a crumbling tree trunk. But no tanks. Still, the feeling persisted, like a presence just out of sight, watching, waiting, measuring the distance. The river curved gently to the right, widening into a marshy stretch of tall reeds. Their yellow-green stalks swayed with each distant concussion, forming a living curtain that obscured the tank's passage. Oswald lifted his periscope. "Good cover here. They won't see us unless—" A loud crack echoed through the forest. Not artillery. Metal. Ritter stiffened. "Weber, stop!" The Panzer froze midstream. The forest went silent. Eerily silent, except for the distant roll of artillery fire. Oswald adjusted the periscope again. "Sir, I think something's moving up on the ridge." Kraus's voice trembled. "One of them?" Ritter didn't want to answer. He slowly raised his binoculars. Smoke curled across the tree line like torn veils. Through the shifting gray, the outline emerged. Massive, angular, unmistakable. A turret, a hull, sloped armor that caught a glint of reflected firelight. Weber whispered, "Sir, is that—" "Yes," Ritter said quietly. It was the same T-34. Again. Its hull bore fresh scars, new gouges from artillery fragments. Smoke residue streaked the turret, but it was intact, alive, and it was looking directly down the river. Ritter's chest tightened. "It knows where we're going," he muttered. The T-34 began descending the slope, snaking its way through fallen logs and burning underbrush. Slowly, deliberately, hunting. Kraus clutched the breech. "Sir, orders?" Ritter gripped the cupola rim until his knuckles turned white. "We run," he said. "We run now. Weber, full throttle, drive!" The Panzer III roared to life, spraying water as it surged down the riverbed. Behind them, the T-34 accelerated. The Revenant had found them again. And this time, it wasn't alone. Two more shadows entered the tree line behind it. Water erupted behind the Panzer III as Weber pushed the throttle to its limit, the Maybach engine screaming against the cold river current. Mud and river stones churned beneath the tracks, spit outward in violent sprays as the tank lunged forward like a wounded animal desperate to survive. Ritter braced himself in the cupola, wind and smoke whipping his face. The forest ahead glowed orange, the canopy above them ignited by stray artillery shells. Embers rained down onto the river's surface, sizzling as they died in the current. Behind them, the Soviet engines howled. The sound was unmistakable. One T-34, then two, then three. Their snarls harmonized into a metallic chorus of pursuit. Oswald, fighting the turret controls, twisted the gun rearward. "Sir, they're gaining. Too fast on dry ground. Too much power." "Keep them in your sights," Ritter called back. "Don't fire unless you have a clean hit." "We'll never get a clean hit on a moving target bouncing through a forest," Oswald snapped. "Do it anyway." The turret jerked erratically as the Panzers slammed over rocks hidden beneath the water. The river twisted and broadened, tall reeds brushing against the tank's sides as they approached the bend. Kraus shouted over the engine roar, "Sir, if we take the bend at this speed, we'll flip." "We don't slow down," Ritter barked, because slowing down meant death. The forest floor shook behind them as the lead T-34 crashed through the trees, forcing its way down the slope in a spray of bark and shattered roots. The resurrected one, its hull still bearing scorch marks, led the pack. Of course it did. Ritter risked a glance back through the periscope slit. He saw it. The Revenant. Water foamed around its tracks as it entered the river. The tank cut the current like a steel predator, its turret already swinging toward them. "Oswald," Ritter shouted. "Angle the turret now." "I'm trying," Oswald grunted, knuckles white on the traverse wheel. Weber yelled, "Hold on!" The river bent sharply left. The Panzer III struck the turn too fast, skidding sideways on the slick stones. The left track dipped dangerously, the entire hull tilting until Ritter felt gravity pulling him sideways. For one horrifying moment, it seemed the tank would roll. "Counter-steer," Ritter shouted. Weber fought the controls, slamming his entire body weight into the steering levers. The Panzer groaned, metal screaming in protest, and righted itself just before the riverbank could flip them. Behind them, the T-34 hit the bend with far less grace. It plowed through the water like a battering ram, sending a tidal wave rolling down the riverbed, but its weight worked against it. The current shoved hard against its right flank. It skidded. It fishtailed. Ritter saw the opening. "Oswald, take the shot." Oswald didn't hesitate. He fired. The cannon's roar thundered through the forest, echoing up the burning trees. The shell streaked across the river and slammed into the T-34's turret ring just as it struggled to correct its angle. A plume of smoke burst upward. But when the smoke cleared, the T-34 kept coming. The shell had scarred the turret, but not stopped it. Krauss's voice cracked. "It shrugged it off again." Ritter grit his teeth. "We only needed to slow it down." The damaged turret struggled to rotate, grinding in protest. The T-34 lagged behind, forced out of its perfect line of pursuit. But the two tanks behind it, the fresh ones, surged forward to fill the gap. "Two inbound," Oswald warned. "Both closing fast." Artillery cracked overhead again, farther away now, the barrage creeping toward the horizon. The forest fires behind them roared like a furnace, painting the sky blood orange. Weber spotted something ahead. "Sir, fallen trees across the river." Ritter lifted himself higher in the hatch. Two massive pines had collapsed across the riverbed, trunks thicker than a man's torso, blocking the path ahead. The Panzer III could push through. Maybe. But not fast. Behind them, the T-34s would catch them in seconds. Ritter made a choice. "Driver, turn right, up the embankment." Weber blinked. "Up the slope?" "Sir, it's too steep." "Do it!" Weber threw the controls, and the Panzer III veered toward the muddy slope. Water sloshed violently as the tank climbed, treads clawing at the soaked earth. The engine whined. The hull shuddered. The treads spun, caught, and the Panzer lurched upward, bouncing over roots and broken branches as it fought its way out of the riverbed. The first T-34 reached the fallen trees. It didn't stop. It smashed through them, logs splintering like matchsticks under its immense weight. Weber cursed. "They're insane." "No," Ritter murmured. "They're determined." The Panzer III crested the embankment, emerging onto a swath of open ground, a long, narrow meadow shaped like a natural corridor. "Full throttle," Ritter ordered. "Run for the ridgeline." The Panzer surged forward, crushing wild grass under its treads. Behind them, 3 Soviet tanks burst from the river, steam swirling around them like war spirits rising for the chase. Oswald swallowed hard. "Sir, we can't outrun them." "We don't outrun them," Ritter said. "We outthink them." He scanned the meadow ahead. The terrain dipped again, toward a line of glacial boulders scattered like giants' teeth. An idea sparked, a dangerous idea, but the only one they had. "Driver," Ritter said, "veer left toward those rocks." Krauss blinked. "Sir, that terrain will wreck our suspension." "Only if we hit it wrong," Ritter said, eyes narrowing. "And the T-34s? They'll hit it wrong. Because the T-34's greatest strength, its speed over rough ground, would become its weakness if forced into terrain meant for lighter machines." Weber shifted gears. "Left it is." Behind them, the revenant T-34 roared the loudest, engine notes rising like a challenge. It was coming, faster, closer, and Ritter knew this was the moment that would decide everything. The meadow narrowed as the Panzer III tore across it, grass whipping against its hull. The boulder field ahead glistened with moisture, morning dew still clinging to the stone despite the rising heat from the burning forest behind them. Ritter braced himself in the turret as Weber accelerated, every vibration rattling through the hull and into his spine. The first rocks loomed, small at first, boot-high stones scattered like ancient debris. Then larger ones, man-high jagged slabs rising from the earth as though something beneath had tried to claw its way out. Krauss shouted, "Sir, suspension's already struggling." "It'll hold," Ritter yelled back. "Just keep her straight." Weber gritted his teeth and guided the Panzer III into the field, treads smashing over the uneven ground. The tank jolted violently, nearly throwing Ritter against the hatch rim. But it stayed upright. Behind them, the Soviet engines wailed. Ritter risked a glance back. The 3 T-34s barreled into the meadow like charging beasts, their silhouettes framed by sheets of flame still licking above the treetops. The revenant T-34, scarred, soot-blackened, led the pack. Its bow plate glowed faintly from earlier impacts, and it wasn't slowing. "Oswald," Ritter called. "Turret, cover our flank. Make them think we're still trying to pick them off." Oswald swung the turret left and right in deliberate, taunting arcs. The illusion of preparation. The illusion of confidence. Ritter needed them aggressive, overconfident. Weber hit the first real rise in the terrain. The Panzer III bounced, hard. The treads squealed, metal clanking against stone. Inside, the crew lurched violently, Kraus striking his knee against the radio set with a strangled yelp. But the Panzer recovered. The T-34s behind them did not hesitate. They surged into the stone field, full speed. Ritter whispered under his breath, "Come on, come on." He watched the lead T-34 strike the first cluster of boulders. The Soviet suspension absorbed the first impact, then the second. But the third. The tank hit a half-buried glacial stone the size of a cartwheel. Shockwave slammed up through its right tread. The hull lurched violently to the side. A metallic crack echoed across the meadow. The T-34's right track split. Links snapped like broken vertebrae. The tank slewed sideways, throwing up a plume of dirt as it crashed into a tooth-shaped boulder. Its turret slammed against the stone with a muffled gong, momentum nearly throwing it off the ground. Ritter clenched a fist. "One!" But the other 2 barrels of Soviet steel kept coming. Weber fought to keep the Panzer III steady as he threaded between 2 massive stones. The hull scraped the left one, sparks blossoming like fireflies. "Careful," Kraus yelled. "We don't have a choice," Weber barked. The second T-34 followed, treads churning like a beast charging through a trap. It hit the same patch, but its driver corrected faster than the first. The Soviet tank swung toward the Panzer's path, trying to cut them off. Oswald cried, "They're adapting!" "Then we don't give them time," Ritter shouted. "Hard right, toward the split stones." Weber yanked the steering levers, and the Panzer III swerved toward a cluster of fractured boulders where an ancient slab had split into 2 jagged halves. The gap between them was just barely wider than their hull. "Sir, there's no way," Kraus began. "There is if he nails it," Ritter said. "Weber, thread it." Weber didn't respond. He only set his jaw and aimed the Panzer dead center. The tank barreled toward the narrow gap, 10 meters, 6, 3. The Panzer III slammed through, both hull sides scraping stone. Sparks flew in sheets. Ritter ducked instinctively as rock dust rained down through the open hatch. Then, they burst through. Behind them, the second T-34 tried to follow. It did not fit. Its left side smashed into the stone wall with bone-shaking force. The turret wrenched sideways, and the tank ground to a halt, wedged between the 2 ancient slabs like an enormous steel animal trapped by its own mass. Ritter turned just in time to see its engine belch black smoke as the driver desperately tried to wriggle free. It wouldn't. "2!" Ritter shouted over the roar of the engine. Only one remained. The Revenant. The last T-34 burst through the meadow, refusing to slow, or even consider slowing. Its driver plowed directly toward the boulder field, choosing brute force over finesse. And it worked. The tank smashed smaller stones apart, crushed others under its weight, and shoved aside obstacles that would have destroyed lesser machines. It was not as fast now, but still fast enough. Oswald said quietly, "Sir, it's not stopping." Ritter felt the truth of those words. This T-34 wasn't chasing them. It was hunting them. He scanned the terrain ahead, searching for another trap, another chance, another miracle. Then he saw it. The meadow's end. A steep ridge rising into a high crest, covered in loose shale and unstable soil. A death zone for heavy armor. But if they reached the top first, they could vanish behind the crest. The T-34 would have to charge blind. And a blind tank on unstable ground. Ritter breathed in sharply. "We head for the ridge." Kraus sucked in air. "Sir, the incline." "We reach it," Ritter said, "or we die here." Weber pushed the Panzer III to its limits. The engine roared, gears grinding as the tank tore out of the boulder field and surged toward the rising earth ahead. Behind them, the Revenant T-34 thundered after them, smashing smaller rocks aside, its eyes of steel locked on its prey. Ritter could feel it. The chase was reaching its end, one way or another. The ridge towered ahead, steep, uneven, and slick with loose shale that shimmered like broken glass in the first rays of dawn. The Panzer III hit the incline at full throttle, its engine screaming in protest. The treads clawed at the earth, slipping, catching, slipping again as Weber fought to hold traction. Ritter clung to the hatch rim, the entire world trembling beneath him as the tank struggled upward. Dust clouded around them, pouring off the ridge in waves, coating the hull in a pale gray layer. Kraus shouted over the engine noise, "We're losing power." "We're almost there," Ritter called back. "Keep her steady." Behind them, the T-34 reached the base of the ridge. It didn't hesitate. It didn't slow. It climbed. The Soviet engine bellowed, a guttural roar rolling up the slope like thunder. Its tracks tore at the earth with savage force, sending cascades of rocks tumbling down the incline. Oswald's voice cracked. "Sir, it's going to ram us." Ritter turned. The Revenant T-34 was closing fast. Too fast. Its hull still bore the scorch marks of their earlier shot. Its bow plate gleamed with scratches and shrapnel scars. Smoke trailed faintly from its engine grills, but its speed never faltered. The Panzer III struggled upward. The T-34 ate the distance behind them. "Weber!" Ritter yelled. "Hard left! Now!" Weber jerked the steering levers, and the Panzer III veered sideways across the ridge path, its treads skidding on loose shale. The T-34 adjusted instantly. It followed, cutting the angle, closing the gap. 10 meters, 7, 5. Kraus screamed, "It's going to hit us!" Oswald swung the turret and fired point blank. The shell struck the T-34's turret cheek. A flash, a plume of smoke, a spray of shrapnel. When the dust cleared, the T-34 was still coming. The round had cracked part of its armor, but hadn't stopped momentum. Ritter's heart pounded so hard he could hear it over the engines. "We can't outrun it," he muttered. Then he realized something. The shale beneath the Panzer III was unstable, loose, crumbling, which meant the T-34's added weight. Its reckless speed would doom it the moment it pushed too far onto the slope, unless someone tricked it into overcommitting. "Driver!" Ritter yelled. "Angle us toward that outcrop, then brake hard!" Weber understood instantly. He drove the Panzer III toward a jagged stone lip jutting from the ridge, just stable enough to hold their lighter weight. The T-34 locked into its pursuit, powered forward in a straight line, closing to mere meters. "Now!" Ritter shouted. Weber slammed the brakes. The Panzer III lurched to a near stop. The T-34 overshot, too fast to adjust. Its right tread struck the unstable shale. The earth beneath it gave way with a deafening crack. For a single suspended moment, the Soviet tank hung in the air, its engine roaring, its weight shifting like a wounded predator losing balance. Then the entire ridge face collapsed. The T-34 tumbled sideways, its hull rolling, metal shrieking as it scraped down the slope. Rocks cascaded with it, forming an avalanche of stone and steel. The tank smashed into a boulder halfway down, its turret wrenching sideways with a brutal, echoing clang. It didn't rise again. Silence fell. Just the wind over the ridge, carrying with it ashes from the burning forest beyond. Weber slumped over the controls, trembling. Kraus exhaled a shaky breath. Oswald leaned against the turret, staring at the fallen Soviet machine with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Ritter remained standing in the hatch for a long moment, eyes fixed on the wreck below. The morning sun cast a harsh light across the battlefield, revealing smoke trails, shattered stones, and the final resting place of the iron beast that had refused to die. Weber finally broke the silence. "Sir, what now?" Ritter looked toward the horizon, where the distant rumble of battle still echoed. "Now," he said quietly, "we find our lines, and we warn command." "Warn them of what?" Oswald asked. Ritter exhaled. "That the T-34," he said, "doesn't die when you kill it." The Panzer III rolled forward over the crest of the ridge, disappearing beyond it as the sun rose behind them, illuminating the ruins of the unstoppable Soviet tank one last time.